We are what? It's 9 o'clock almost. So we're less than 2 hours away from what will be the anniversary of the Anti-Terrorist and Effective Death Penalty Act. Prior to this act being implemented, there was an update to the list of identified terrorist organizations provided by the Clinton administration. And one of the things that this did specifically is it identified a substantial additional number of organizations that were identified as being political organizations within Palestine. And this was ironic because this was also around the time of the Camp David and or sort of the Oslo process around trying to address matters related to what was left over from the Intifada and what was a part of the adjustment at that point in time. It was also in consideration of matters related to the signing of the Good Friday Agreement in Ireland, right? And in the situations regarding the situation connected to the Irish. I've elsewhere written a report about my understanding of how information that was compiled as a result of the Good Friday Agreement, including aspects associated with addressing societal matters that included allegations or alleged trauma associated with the Troubles, was involved with a major study that was supported by an NGO that itself was also backed by the Bank of Ulster that had very specific information regarding trauma and experiences of medical problems in Ireland and Northern Ireland. And that the statistical information from this study, I believe, formed a sort of foundation of underwriting for various medical insurance paradigms. What nobody explained to anybody, and I had to learn the hard way, is that included in that information was detailed information about acts of political reprisal that were committed by particular political factions against other political factions, or members within their factions that were determined to be non compliant with the aims of that particular political faction. I read about this in an article that had been written by a noted journalist who wrote in a major publication. It was a compilation of articles. And one of the things it was addressing is it was an interview with members of the Sinn Féin. And included in the interview with these people, the profile specifically of Jerry Adams, it also talked about it within a context of understanding violence that had been engaged regarding the political factions in Ireland and Northern Ireland. And one of the things it talked about was a specific technique that one of the political factions engaged primarily for its own purposes, but not exclusive to that political faction. Where if somebody was determined to be dissatisfying to the particular political faction, that there was a hierarchy around actual infliction of physical pain that usually involved a gunshot to a joint. And that there were actually terms. It was like slang terms that you would say. It would be like you would call it out. It's not like just calling a hit, like an actual assassination. It's not just like you're going to go break somebody's kneecap. They actually had a term for it, depending upon whether or not it was just going to be one wrist or it was going to be both. Whether it was going to be your elbows, knees. It's kind of like head, fingers, toes, except it was wrist, ankles, knees, elbows, even your hips, even your shoulders. And depending upon how pissed they were at you, they would break that many joints. I believe that is part of the underwriting on the insurance book they came up with as a result of the Troubles. There were outlays, or rather, bidding, put on securing a certain number of certain types of injuries specific to understanding the potential to engage in some manner in a form of degeneration of specific joints in order to compel a replacement for that joint, i.e., you getting your kneecap dislocated at a specific time and or being assessed to have had some sort of degeneration of your cartilaginous tissue that would require you at a certain point in time to get a kneecap replacement wasn't just a random injury that you needed assistance with. I actually believe they strategically targeted people, including in certain areas with certain kinds of ailments, including in certain areas with certain kinds of ailments that were meant to have specifically racialized and ethnic implications. And if you had Irish ancestry and you didn't fall in line with the gang, you could get a kneecap knocked out. or in my case, both. But then what happens if you don't pay the gang with a broken kneecap? I literally believe that this is what they did. And not only do I literally believe that this is what they did, including as part of the outroll and implementation of the Affordable Care Act, but I also believe that they tried to use that kind of a process in connection with manipulation of tax code. That I watched it for 2 years. And now they've tried to tweak it. And not only did they try to tweak it, now they're trying to up the ante, so to speak, after they've tested it for its efficiency and its effectiveness to see if they can actually do that so precisely. If they can actually remotely target you with a radio frequency blast that will literally either engage you in some sort of appearance of accident, so you twist your ankle or you pop your kneecap out, or if they can literally direct energy to break a bone. I've watched it. I know about the technology. I've even seen some of the patents. And this is what they've been doing. And at the same time, well, what were they doing on the other side of the road? Anti-Terrorist and Effective Death Penalty Act, implemented in 1996. Part of what happened as a result of the implementation of the Anti-Terrorist and Effective Death Penalty Act was what I understood to be the first case that was brought to the fore specifically around that act, which had to do with the kidnapping of a Palestinian American in the Chicagoland area who was secretly rendered by the Federal Bureau of Investigation and denied any representation or even disclosure of his location to his family for a very substantial amount of time. One of the primary factors in that case had to do with the fact that when he was in Palestine, he had been arrested for accusations that he had been involved in some sort of assistance to a political faction that had been identified as a terrorist organization. And in the course of this, there had been an interrogation, and in the course of this interrogation, a confession had been evinced from him that was used in court. But in the Israeli court, they had determined that the confession had been obtained by torture, and the confession was not allowed to be admitted as evidence in order to hold him and maintain a conviction or promote and maintain a conviction of him as a terrorist. He ended up in the United States. At some point later, he was arrested. And when he was arrested, he was tried. And in the course of that trial, the American courts ended up obtaining that specific confession, and they allowed it to be used as evidence. Not as evidence to discuss what it may have meant that he had been put under duress while he was in Palestine and how that may have impacted his relationship with the United States, but rather to literally be used as evidence to substantiate allegations that while he was in the United States, he had committed crimes that could be identifiable as being prosecutable under this specific law. Since that time, the United States has engaged in multiple processes of increasing criminalization of people that may not have at the time been identified as Muslim, but over time were increasingly identified exclusively by a ethno-national association with or as a Muslim or a member of a group that was from a Muslim country. And in the course of doing this, they have compiled huge databases, not just the Department of Justice, by the way, but also the Department of Treasury, and also in connection with local police databases that have characterized individuals identified as Muslims in very, very, very comprehensive schemes. There's tons and tons and tons of people in these databases, some of whom have no actual reason to be there because they themselves may have been guilty of any crime or even suspected of a crime, but merely as part of a process that was allowed to unfold. And I contend that what they've done is they've engaged in huge crimes connected to electronic warfare involving these people, attempting to genetically engineer them and or harvest their DNA, while also creating fake and false biometric profiles of them in order to not only aid and abet acts of money laundering by people who aren't even Muslim or aren't even in connection with an origin from what would be identified as a Muslim country, but specifically to maintain and promulgate this ruse of Islamic fundamentalism. And the understanding was that at a certain point in time it would flip. That the Muslims could be harvested for 25 years to create insurance to cover up for what they're doing now. Then they want to call it what? What is the author of that bill, or the person who was the primary sponsor of the bill that was allowed to get passed? saying that his major priorities are on the 25th anniversary. We cannot let this happen. We cannot let this happen. I am not sorry that you didn't bust out both my kneecaps. I'm really not sorry. I'm not sorry you did not succeed in getting my liver. I'm really not sorry. I'm really not sorry that you did not succeed in getting my breast. I'm really not. But I am sorry that I have not in 25 years been able to stop you from mind raping and including in whatever was allowed to not be disclosed regarding the alleged Muslim ban implemented by Trump that was opportunistically availed of by certain people in acts of illegal coinage. I am sorry that I have not succeeded in getting you deposed and prosecuted for capital crimes. You and every single person that supported you. Whether they're in law enforcement, whether they claim that they're in a state government, whether they claim that they're in banking and finance or investment, regardless of what their dad's name or their mother's name was or what their DNA or their blood says. I am sorry about that. And I'm going to have to deal with that for the rest of my life. And so are you.